Hello and welcome. As folks are tuning in, I just want to thank everybody for joining us on this lovely Thursday to dig in on all topics AI, workplace intelligence, and really what opportunities exist for us to kind of merge these topics. How can we lean into emergent tools, technologies, systems to amplify what we do to design experiences, buildings, and really just work lives for people and occupants? But before we get started, I want to first introduce myself and our team at PLASTARC if you're new to our panels and webinars. My name is Amy Rosen, and I'm a sociospatial designer on a team called PLASTARC. And we believe that we can make the world a better place, one workplace at a time. This is our mission that we push forward with really relentlessly. And we do so through a number of means and through different services and sectors. But most predominantly, we focus on employee experience strategy, change leadership, executive education, while continuously performing research on the back end. We're always interested in what's new on your minds, what you're thinking about and talking about, and collecting data, including on today's webinar. So if you're tuned in, get ready for a couple polls strewn throughout today's conversation. At PLASTARC, we believe that it's critical to take an interdisciplinary approach to workplace. This is because if you're really trying to create an experience that suits all people and all branches of an organization, you have to think about the HR needs, the IT, the real estate, and how they intersect and intertwine, because that's really where the heart of workplace experience lies. And at the same time, in order to be not only inclusive, but confident in what we're proposing, what we're thinking about, and the decisions we're making, we like to collect as much data as possible. Something that we like to show is this image of the jelly beans in the jar. And I like to say this wisdom of the crowds quote that the more people that guess how many jelly beans are in that jar, the closer you'll get to the actual number of jelly beans in the jar. Just a fun fact that kind of goes to show that more data is better than less data. The more points and people you're interacting with, the better you understand what's actually happening and the context that you're asking questions within. And with that in mind, I kind of want to first just gauge our audience and get a pulse on where you are in terms of the remote telework, distributed work circumstance. So I'm going to launch a poll now. And if you're tuned in, go ahead and let us know how many days per week you spent working remotely before COVID-19 restrictions, and then how many days per week you're working remotely now. Go ahead and answer those two questions while I cover a couple other things. So one additional thing that we really advocate for and push for at our team at PLASTARC is shifting the metrics that surround workplace. So you might be used to things that we refer to as building metrics or hard metrics, things like cost per seat, cost per person, square foot per person, all those things that you might typically associate with the built environment. But instead, we ask the question of how can we measure in terms of people, since they really are the most valuable asset in workplace? How can we think about things like accessibility, collaboration, connection, ergonomics, brand expression, all of those things that maybe feel intangible and immeasurable? How can we quantify those meaningfully? And so that's really what we've been applying as we've been navigating this moment of shift. I'm sure you're familiar with the pulse of workplace right now, that we've really all been grappling with new trends, new themes, new goals and priorities, whether it's reevaluating your workplace why, refreshing your space to fit new expectations, building a hybrid workplace model, building new and sustainable practices, reinforcing equitable experiences, or testing new things and collecting data. All of these are part of what we've referred to as our roadmap for the future. So before we get started in today's discussion, I just want to kind of leave you all with this, that we are here to help you achieve success. If you're thinking about these questions that we're talking about today, or if you just want to talk about how to make more efficient right-sized spaces, how to build a better user experience, create more engagement, or continuously learn, we are here to help. And we're also just here to talk with you. If you're thinking about any of the words on the screen here, I want to have a conversation and hear what's on your mind. What are you seeing in your arenas, in your sectors, and with your organizations about the future of work, change management, experience strategy, activity-based working, everything under the sun? But that's enough about me. Let's see what you all had to say about your remote work. What you're seeing on the screen here are results from a couple of years of webinars that we've conducted and some of the trends that we started to see, where on average, people said they worked about 0.9 or 1 day remotely pre-COVID and about 2.7 going forward, with a pretty dramatic shift there, right, to over half of the week. And it looks like folks on the line are pretty aligned in that regard, with 95% of you being fully in office before the pandemic, and now pretty mixed. I see a really nice mixture of 5 days, 2 days, 0 days. So it's really nice to see the diversity on the line. And I think that'll play a role in your different questions and perspectives today. If you've joined our recent webinars, you know that with all of this data comes a new kind of circumstance for workplace design and decision making, right? If people are coming in anywhere from 0 to 5 days a week, the amount of utilization and the people you're actually planning to design for is incredibly variable. What used to be pretty predictable is now a much larger aperture of variability. On any day, you could be at 10, 20% occupancy, all the way up to maybe 90 if you're having an all hands day. And so how to really accommodate that range is the flexibility question that we've been thinking about. And that's been the undercurrent of a lot of our conversations. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on, because you're only coming in a portion of the week, or some of you maybe are coming in for the full week, what does that mean for your why you're there? The fact that maybe the actual value and purpose of space needs to lean more heavily into what we refer to as occupant experience, that we really need to avoid the pitfall that is real estate as object and think about the actual interactions and the experience and the confluences that happen when you're in space with other people. And this aligns with a lot of the trends that you've probably been taking stock of. Things on your mind might be change in flexibility, collaboration, social connection, sustainability, well-being, technology, hybridity, or even augmentation and automation. And as you likely assumed, we're leaning into that last one today. And I'm going to use that as our kind of kickoff point to introduce the panelists that have joined me to really dig deep into these conversation topics. First, we have Dan Stein, who I would love to welcome. Dan is tuning in from San Antonio, Texas, where he is the Director of Design Technology and leads the internal research program investigations at the top-ranked architecture firm Lake Flato. He's a registered architect, educator, author, blogger, international speaker, and in addition to teaching graduate students at NDSU, he's written 18 textbooks, which are used extensively in the academic market. So I can say confidently that Dan knows what he's talking about. And I'm excited to hear not only his perspectives on digital technology within the architecture, engineering, and construction industries, but also how he's applying that to his dedication to further the design profession. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Wonderful. Next, we have Elena Beloshapkova. Elena was named Businesswoman of the Year by Ernst & Young and is the CEO and founder of AI-driven workplace platform Inscape. Elena founded Inscape with a remarkable track record of 18 years working with Fortune 500 companies all around the world. And in her 10 years as CEO and founder, she saw many clients dissatisfied with existing workplace management platforms. That helped her to kind of see the problem firsthand and ignited her mission to help companies operating in hybrid, remote, or in-office settings. So with 8 patents in technology and design under her belt, her vision is to become an indispensable solution for every company managing their workplaces, both physical and digital while increasing productivity and enhancing employee and visitor experience. And Elena, I'm sure you're going to apply all of that to today's conversation.
Thank you so much. I couldn't have said it better. Thanks so much for this wonderful introduction. And I'm very excited to be here and talk about everything AI related in the workplace.
Amazing. Thank you again. And last but not least, we have Federico Negro, who's joining from Brooklyn, New York, where Federico is the founder and CEO of the Kanoa Supply Company. Kanoa is a collaborative software for FF&E design and lifecycle management with a mission to make it easier for more people to design more sustainable interiors. Previously, he was the head of physical design at WeWork, and he was also the co-founder and head of project groups at Case Incorporated, which was acquired by WeWork back in 2015. Federico will be bringing his passion for design, architecture, prefab, technology, housing, climate, decarbonization, and others to today's conversation, thinking about how AI, technology, and specifically the intersection of software development and the built environment really relate to construction, product and process design, scaling design-driven companies, and entrepreneurship. So I'm thrilled to have you here with us today, Federico, and welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And I'm actually going to kick it off to you first to start us off. I know on a lot of people's minds, the topic of AI, artificial intelligence, is a little bit taboo. Perhaps people on the line have a mixed spectrum of knowledge and awareness of what really is AI, where did it come from, why is it on everybody's minds? So I think first and foremost, we should take a step back, maybe reflect a little bit on where we've been and how we really got here. So from your perspective, how did we get here? What's kind of changed? And how do you think this led to the moment we're in right now?
Thanks for the question. I think it's important to to always start with context, of course. And as it pertains to technology and specifically in design or in AEC, of course, we have a long trajectory of software making its way into our field, many decades of it. And I think what you'll hear in general is, AI is not new, but really something has changed in the last year or two. And so maybe I'll focus more on that part of it. The way we see it, is really that there's been a bit of a revolution in access, more so than just a revolution in the technology itself. And what we mean by that is that the way in which you have a technology that had been largely sort of incredibly expensive to be able to access, incredibly sort of difficult to be able to handle in a way. And what's happened over the last few years is that it's become productized to the point where now anybody sort of writing a Google Doc, is able to access it. And so its applications explode, of course, tremendously. And we equate that with saying, like, it used to be a time where more difficult tools had more buttons on them. There's this sort of, you have this image here, say, of AutoCAD or even say Revit. At some point, the more features or buttons you had, maybe the more you could actually charge for the software or something like that. Now really we're in an age of simplicity where it's not about a few super users to come in and are the only ones who are the sort of like the keepers of the keys of this sort of magical new features or software. It's like, well, anybody who understands natural language can actually access it. And so, where it used to be tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars to train and onboard and implement things, now it could take an hour. It could take 30 minutes. And so that to us is the big real shift that's happened is access. And on top of all that is the business model that comes with it. Many of these are free, right? And so it's not just that it takes a lot of money to like onboard people, or used to take a lot of money to onboard people. The software itself also costs a lot of money. And now we have these sort of very sort of consumer level technology becoming so so able that for free or for just a few dollars you're able to access it, and many people can access it. And so I think that's really what's changed, and that's why we see AI everywhere now. Its applications continuing to explode. If I go a little bit deeper and want to go sort of too deep on this, there's really two main things that I think that two types of data in our industry that have really been hit by quote unquote like the wave of AI. And one of them is within natural language, which is just written word, which we see all the time in specifications and meeting notes and minutes and all of these things that are required of us, of course. And then in what we would call sort of computer vision or image models, where pixels are able to be translated into basically a meaning or some sort of early semantics. And so what you have with that is that with the combination of these two things, two of the three vectors are the third, right? But two of the three main deliverables or data or types of data that our industry works with are now being covered. By the time the third one comes about, right, like now, it creates a sort of pervasiveness into the system that becomes really interesting. So anyway, I'll leave it there. I think that's sort of how we see what's changing, and we think it's all only going to accelerate from here, given all of the investment that's going into it.
Yeah, I think the way that you illustrated that, or kind of almost painted that picture, was really helpful and showed all the kind of maybe vectors that are really feeding into this moment of excitement, but also perhaps fear. I think some of this may feel sudden to folks, even though we just acknowledge that it's been a slow build, but it's something that I think we may not even realize is already pervasive in our day-to-day lives. I'm curious, maybe if we pass it over to Dan, if you want to jump in and maybe build on some of the points Federico just made, but also talk about how we've already been using it without even maybe knowing about it.
One thing that came to mind as Federico was talking is there's a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, and he illustrates, very elegantly how the shift in implementing something like coming up with the MVP for a product, for example, involves what people actually need or want. And you think about in the book, he talks about the hard drive market and how when the portable hard drive came out, there was a lot of features that we gave up. So to his point, Federico's point about giving up a bunch of buttons, we also sometimes give up control, but we have all these new opportunities for inspiration and efficiency and exploration. And so that's really cool. But then also, like you said, Amy, there's interesting tools a lot of architects, like my peers, are already using that are AI powered, and they might not even realize it. For example, Enscape, the real-time rendering visualization software that a lot of architects use, that is based on different design platforms like Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, ArchiCAD. If you have an NVIDIA RTX graphics card in your computer, Enscape actually, they actually commissioned me to write an article about their implementation of this about 1.5 years ago on their website. They use something called the tensor cores on that GPU. So in case you don't know, NVIDIA is one of the leading AI chip manufacturers in the world. And so Enscape uses this deep learning super sampling NVIDIA functionality on the graphics cards and uses AI to upscale the resolution. So it can do less compute and therefore work on bigger models and be really responsive and efficient. So that's really cool, where some of us are using AI already and don't even know it. And then Autodesk, for example, a lot of architects use Revit, and an opportunity to do early energy modeling within that ecosystem is Autodesk Insight. And that's a cloud-based tool that actually calculates multiple values for each input to allow you to explore different configurations of wall assemblies and window types and internal loads. And it uses what's essentially a subset of AI and machine learning. And it's done that for several years now to help more quickly get to really accurate answers within that range of values. So there's a lot of really cool opportunities there that some of us are using and don't even actually know it.
I love that. I think it's such an exciting moment to almost question our own tools and devices, right? I think as you were talking, I was asking myself, how many tools do I use that I don't even realize have a layer of automation or a layer of machine learning, right? That we've just become so accustomed to almost. It's become integral in our operations to a point where the threat of AI really isn't a threat. It's more of a how much more do we want it in our lives, and why should we invest in more intentional implementation perhaps? And I think that this is a perfect time to pass it over to you, Elena, to jump in and maybe share your thoughts on that why. What have you seen and learned in your work with various companies and organizations about some of the value add here and why AI can be beneficial?
So first of all, there are so many different use cases of AI in workplace. I can start with the most basic ones, like, how much space do we need? And our platform allows you to come, measure everything for a couple of weeks and give you predictions on how your space will be used by, not just by anyone, by your specific company, by your specific team members in 2025, in 2026, in 2027. And some of the customers, for example, their goal is to save, let's say, 67% by 2027. So how exactly can you do that? Based on the data that you have right now, based on the data points that you have already, what will your team members need from space? How can you figure out which floor plan will suit their needs better? So space optimization and predictive analytics is probably one of the most common use cases. And I do believe that everyone should try to test it, because it's fascinating on how easy it is, and how, like, this tool just didn't exist 10 years ago. And it fascinates me every single day on, like, what can you get out of the platform. The second biggest category is how can we make this existing space more effective? How can we make sure that we will enhance productivity of our team members by offering them the most effective version of the physical workspace that we can provide them with? And another, I would say, part of this question is, right now, workspace, it's not just your physical workspace. It's not just your physical office. It's way more than that, because again, as you saw in the results of this poll, half of us, we don't even come to the office that often. So our workspace right now is, our digital workspace is a huge part of our workspace experience. So AI should cover it all, it's my belief. So, and the third main category is employee engagement. Everyone is trying to measure employee engagement. It is quite difficult to measure it, because you have to ask people, and you have to rely on them being able to find time in their busy schedule to answer some questions. So instead of you just relying on their answers, you can also ask the system what your team members need. And based on the data points that you already collected about how they use the space, what they like, what they don't like, what time do they come to the office, which spaces they like the most and prefer to use, which spaces they prefer to use for collaboration, and which spaces they prefer to use when they want to be left alone with a cup of coffee in a phone booth, something like that. So you already have this data, and AI just adds the next level to your existing experience. And you can easily ask in Space AI, like, what do I need to do to increase employee engagement? What do they need out of the system? How can I improve my existing space? And I don't know, again, it's sky's the limit. You can ask so many questions, and there are so many interesting use cases. Sometimes it's how can we save 80% on rent? And this is a real case study with one of our clients here in Boston. And another one is like, how can we increase employee engagement or productivity by 30%? So there are so many different ways how you can enhance experience through AI tools.
I love that. And I especially appreciate the way that you almost flagged how first identifying your metrics and almost goals is perhaps even more critical now, because there's so many ways to change and invest and evolve using AI. And even specifically in the ways that you were just illustrating, you can go in such a wide direction accidentally if you don't have a very clear goal, right? And I think some of the data I was talking about earlier and the trends I was alluding to speak to some of the points you were making about the relevance of space optimization right now, that perhaps we don't need as much real estate. Perhaps we don't need as many desks. Perhaps it's more a question of how to manage that space more effectively, to your point, or make it more functionally and sensorially diverse and engaging. But I think there's even some other perhaps trends and factors playing a role in the value of AI here. And perhaps these are even beyond the context of the occupant experience. And Federico, I think you have a unique perspective on this, given where you sit in your sector and in your role, and kind of how you've been observing what trends are playing a role here. So would you mind jumping in and maybe share your take on the why?
Yeah, so what we have seen, I can probably split it, and I won't be very eloquent about it, but bear with me. We can probably split what's really happened into a series of phases, if you will. There was what I would call the during the pandemic kind of experience shift that happened, the 6-foot radius that we've now all forgotten about, and all of these kinds of things that happened in that moment, that very clearly put the way that our environment is designed into focus. At some point, that gave way to what I would call the next phase, which is just like the immediate post, sort of like just coming out phase, which now was like, well, the 6-foot thing is gone. We have vaccines now. We're in this sort of post. What do we do now? We've just spent 2 to 3 years retraining our whole workforce to not work from the office, and so. Why are we here? Why do we have this? And that period, to a degree, is still happening. And what we're about to enter, and might not even really enter until, I would say, 2026, potentially, like a full 5 years post-pandemic, is what we'd say. Okay, what's the true 21st century version, or at least early 21st century version of what the workplace should be? Because we were still very much living in the 20th century version of it, right? Like the second half of the 20th century, and really 1980s moving forward, went all the way through 2019. And a few things here and there, like open office getting maybe like too wide and things like that, but like the trends were very much the same. And so, frankly, I have no idea what will happen next. What we do know, and what we do see in terms of trends, are first and foremost are that the ratios, it's not that they will be changing. They've already changed. They changed years ago. So the idea that one desk equals one employee is gone. That's completely done. The second thing is the motivation, the function of why people even have a space has fundamentally changed as well. And so what happens now, and what we like to say is probably the biggest shift that's happened, is that it used to be that you used to have a physical space, and then you'd have this technology layer to augment the physical experience. And things like Slack or Zoom or whatever it is, they all were attachments to, or sidecars to, the physical experience. That relationship has flipped. And so now the physical experience is an attachment to, an augmentation of, an extension of the digital experience. And that's the fundamental difference that's changed. And so now, so as an attachment to, as a nice to have, if you will, the physical experience now has a little bit of an additional freedom to be something else. And so what we're seeing is effectively, we're saying what we're calling a shift to the edges, where with less space, with less need, or all that, we have the opportunity. Some companies are taking the opportunity to make nicer spaces, but fewer of them or smaller of them, or to really lean into this idea of this sort of temporary, sort of transient space, which is mostly like, hey, let's do super fun, super collaborative space really quickly, 6 months in and out, and we're done. And it's the middle of that demand curve that at least we see. I mean, we see it from the perspective of a software company, but whenever we sort of training people or talking to them, designers use our tool about what they're designing. So it's clear the trends are always either it's something that's meant to be here for 30 years or something that's going to be here for 6 months, and the middle seems to be missing at this moment.
That's really interesting, and I think it's almost similar to even just the way that we make decisions, right? It's so easy to think short term, it's easy to think long term, but it's always that middle term kind of gray area that feels blurrier, and it's always something that's tricky. And so it's interesting to hear you align that almost with the trends surrounding AI. But I also just appreciate the way that you were comparing the role of technology and real estate to one another, and the flip that's happened, and the almost emphasis that maybe we need to be giving to AI automation technology more than space in our questions, in our contemplation of how to create a viable workplace, right? Whether that's from a user experience perspective or a building performance perspective. Maybe we can dig a bit deeper into what you were talking about, Elena, when you were talking about the work that you do on a day-to-day basis, and how your platform really thinks about facilitating better user experience. I'm specifically curious about that almost application you were speaking about, where you can almost customize space for different people or teams, or make it feel like it's suited just for you by using AI. So how does that really work? And maybe you can shed some light on InSpace's role in that.
Yeah, I would love to. So we work a lot with architects, and typically architects like to work in teams, and one day you can be assigned to one project, and you have to work with this specific team, and preferably you can, a lot of us we like to work, together on this project in the same space. And then tomorrow you will work on a completely different project with a completely different team. And third day you might be on the customer side, and fourth day you might be traveling. So what I really like about the way that you can manage it better now is that you can tell AI to create assignments based on the projects, and make sure that, now it's not like an office manager's job to manage everything. Now you can just connect to whatever system you use to manage your projects, and InSpace will assign seats to people according to their needs and also their personal preference, according to their projects. And again, we are all very different. We can take into consideration what this specific person likes to, what this specific person needs for themselves to be the most productive version. Some of us, it can be remembering their favorite coffee. It can be reminding them to book a parking spot. It can be pinging them when their boss will be in town, or it can be booking the right space to work on this specific project with these specific team members. So again, there are so many ways how you can do this, and real-time data integration is a key, because again, this whole concept of smart assignments and plus added criteria of employee preference can really be a game changer to a lot of companies. And again, sometimes I'm talking about like really small, and it sometimes like seems insignificant, like who cares about the coffee order? But just imagine working in a company where the system remembers everything about you and knows what is your favorite desk, where do you like to sit, who is your favorite colleague. So from the employee perspective, from the user experience, it looks like you have a very smart personal assistant, especially if you've never had a personal assistant. It's going to look really cool. But from the company perspective, from the admin perspective, you collect all these data points and you can truly understand people not just by asking them the right questions, but also by seeing how they actually use your office, how they actually use your space. So
I love that. It seems so intuitive to just invest in something like that and make it. I love the analogy of it. It's your personal assistant. Just because it's technological doesn't mean that it can't be helping you. It can't serve you as your little chat function or really just employee experience amplifier, I would say. I'm curious if folks on the line have either used AI in a similar fashion to what Elena is speaking to, or just in any other fashion to enhance the employee experience at your organization. So go ahead and jump in that poll and let us know. And while you're doing so, I want to pass it back to Dan. We've been talking a lot about how to elevate employee experience or the role of AI in that capacity. I want to maybe take it a step back before employees are ever on site, before any user engages with the space. The design team has to really play a big role in framing that entire world. So how do you see AI kind of coming into that territory? How do you see it, or how are you currently leveraging AI with the goal of optimizing design?
Well, we do use a lot of tools, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit more later, but of course we also occupy and utilize space and have recently just remodeled our space. So there's some fun things to share there. But interesting, there's so many tools, and seems like every day there's a new AI-enabled tool available for us to use, or some of them are generic and not industry specific, like Zoom has AI-enabled note-taking capabilities, and their newer advanced whiteboard feature has a really cool thing where you can pull in, for example, a bulleted list and use AI to make a mind map of this, or expand this outline, or reduce it in size. I'm going to share my screen really quick and just show a couple of graphical examples of industry specific tools that we've been taking advantage of that are pretty cool. So here's a pretty bland view of a residential model. This is actually a model from one of my textbooks on how to use Autodesk Revit, designed for the academic market. And just with something simple like this early on in the design of a building, you could run it through an AI tool, and everybody on the call's probably heard of the text to image tools like Midjourney and DALL-E. Well, some of those opportunities have been, again, packaged up and designed for our industry. So with just some text prompts, but also some opportunities to pre-control the geometry, we can get some really interesting results like this. You can see over here that atmospheric is checked, so it made it kind of overly dramatic, but it's still a really cool sort of inspirational thing. And then there's another tool that we've used called Open Space, and you can see this picture of me here with a 360-degree camera attached to my hard hat, and I could walk the project site. This is our own office remodel. A little over a year ago, I could do it daily, but usually it was once a week. We'd walk the project, and AI actually determined where you were in the building based on where you said you were going to start on a floor plan. And then it essentially creates like a Google Street View, but with a ability to step through time. And then they have some newer functionality that can actually see exposed studs and see conduit and pipe start to show up, and predict the amount of completeness of different parts of the project using AI. But just the ability for a client, for example, I think you have access to this data for 10 years after a project is done, that you could go back and see concealed conditions, but also during construction. Sometimes the contractor would be the one walking the project. And if it's, Lake Plato does work all over the country and islands in the Pacific and the Atlantic. So it can save a lot of environmental footprint and embodied carbon of not having to travel to a site, for example. Here's another example of a SketchUp is a pretty popular modeling tool, and they've created an add-in using stable diffusion. So super simple model on the left, and then you get these really interesting inspiration images on the right. Maybe not something we would show to the client. Maybe it is. It all depends on the project and the client. And but then this might inspire us to go back and make changes to the model and the material and kind of create this iterative process. And then the last example here real quick is like a 40-second video on this building code software we use called Upcodes. We can basically start to have a conversation with the building code, and you first specify your location. So is the project in Minnesota or is it in Texas? And you can ask it, is a vertical grab bar required in an accessible toilet room? And in Minnesota, it'll give you 2 paragraphs and all these references of why it's required. And then in Texas, it'll say 1 simple sentence, no, it's not required, because it's not. So there's some really great opportunities that are starting to come to fruition from all these great developers out there, like Elena and Frederico.
That was fantastic. Yeah, go for it. Dan, did I cut you off? I'm sorry.
No, that's good. Those are the highlights. There's so much more to say, but
yeah, that was a fantastic kind of array of options and tools that you're using. I especially loved the personification of the building code. Like back in architecture school, I wished I could ask my book a question instead of Google, and I even had Google, right? Back in the day, didn't even have that. So this is just so exciting to see the ways that it's becoming more human and personal, but also the way that design process that you were walking us through is being optimized, because we can account for all these variables and factors in ways that our brains simply can't process. And I know, speaking of kind of software and specific tools, Federico, you developed one yourself and your team, and you were really working in a specific and relatively niched area of workplace at the FF&E market. But I think it applies a lot of the principles that Dan was just illustrating in some of those examples, and takes it even a step further with some other layers of machine learning and otherwise. So I would love to hear a little bit more from you about kind of what led to the need that you saw for that platform, and then how does it work? How does it help?
Yeah, sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen as well. Just have it as a background. But what you see here is what we call the canvas, which is Kanoa. This is the software that we've developed. I'll give a little bit of context on the history. You said it in the introduction. I ran design for WeWork prior to Kanoa for several years, and I had come there through their acquisition of another company called Case, where we worked helping lots of companies in this industry implement technology better, extend technology, develop technology. And so there's this, I've spent, let's say, my 20 years of career at this point in what I like to call the tooling of design, or how design gets done, which is different from, say, like just the end product in and of itself. And so the way in which I approached that job at WeWork was very much around sort of tooling this company to be able to scale. It went from 10, 20 locations to 500, very quickly. And so all of the processes, the technology that you need, and all of that. The main insight from that experience was that in all of the things and sort of that the whole value chain of retrofit, which is what WeWork did, and the sort of typical TI model, that was really underserved by technology, was the realm of Epiphany. And so what you see here is a sort of typical workflow for a designer that is designing in Epiphany space. This is like an infinite, we call it an infinite canvas that you're able to come around and navigate, et cetera, and you're able to, but it's semantic in the sense that it has actual real specifications that you can work with, et cetera, So I'll show a couple of examples of how, whether you know it or not, how Canoa is using and implementing AI to help designers. Our core function is to make this particular space better for this type of designer. And in that, we subscribe to what we call a co-pilot model, or where our only goal is to allow or help the designer get more cycles in the same amount of time, and to potentially explore, let's say, discover surprising spaces or things that maybe they weren't able to do. And so here I have just copy pasted an image from the internet. What you see is that there's this layer. We talked about access before. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to do whatever. I just copy pasted an image, and already Canoa is trying to recognize if there are any furniture elements in this image, .png. And so it does. It recognizes that there's some objects here. It understands that it's round. It understands its color. It doesn't know what it is yet. But it's running a matching algorithm around our own database and seeing, well, there's a bunch of other things that have a similar form factor. There's round thing, this round thing, this round thing, this round thing, and one of them may or may not be a match. Of course, in this case, we find this element and we just happen to have that in our database for products, and you're able to see it. The same thing, say, could happen with an object where maybe it doesn't recognize it, and so, but it's still gave us chairs, and it still gave us soft seating, right? And so, in a way, and it's doing this just through images. We didn't sort of hard code all of this stuff. And so what we're seeing is a transition from what we'd say parametric or let's say option-based models that are really configurators, that within a design space you can get any number of infinite possibilities. What machine learning, what this is doing is using computer vision, which is one type of AI, to recognize that there's an item here, and then running a recommendations engine, which is using machine learning to understand to learn and get better and better and better that there's a match here that can be made. And so as this gets better, of course, designers can do more. The other thing we can do is, now similar to, say, like Spotify, as you're driving into you say you like a song and it begins to create a taste profile for you, that we're able to begin to understand if this object is one thing, then there might be some other elements that are used along, that would be used alongside this element. So say if I bring this chair here and I find friends again, and maybe there's this other, there's this table, then I find friends again, and here's this other element. And as I go through this, what we're helping the designer do is just, again, go through more cycles with structured data, but in just as playful of a way as we used to. I would have had to go to every one of these websites to find all this information, to get these images, to get all of that. And of course, if I just want the actual images themselves, the marketing images, I'm able to get that as well. And so there's lots of things here that you can do, and all of these really are just augmenting the designer in their process as they go. Somebody mentioned before the idea of, say, like circularity, for example, is a big trend we see in workplace now. You have all this stuff. Why do you want to go out and buy a bunch of new things? And we see, I'll go down to the floor plan down here, where we see a lot of offices turn into now this kind of layout, where workstations have been sort of cleared out, and now we see a lot of sort of team homes and congregation spaces and those kinds of things. and you want to be able to say reuse the components that, reuse a lot of the goods that you had. And so the ability to, we see that as fundamentally a data problem. And so the ability to go in here, understand what this thing is, understand whether we own it or we don't own it. So there's an inventory management system, and then of course be able to make changes, add, change, whatever it is, and action upon this information really quickly. So all of these things are, we see them as surgical implementations of different types of technologies to always aid a specific workflow. It's not the technology itself is almost unimportant. It's what's the workflow that it's trying to augment, what's the workflow that it's trying to improve, so that we can do more, we can do better, for our clients, for this planet. I'll sort of end with saying, the vast majority of the work that like sort of goes unseen, if you will, in our cities is all of this constant retrofit that happens over and over and over and over and over and over again. And all of that stuff is being done by people today, and if we can do it better, we design is largely a positive force in our world. And so the more that we can get design out into the world, the more that we're able to improve access to design from our perspective, the better. And so these types of spaces that are lighter weight, that are more flexible, all of these types of spaces are, what we're seeing a lot of companies move toward, because they feel softer, they feel lighter, they feel, there's less embodied carbon in them, of course, and they also feel more forgiving if we made the wrong decision. We can change our minds. Like maybe our physical spaces don't have to be as hard-coded as they used to be.
Absolutely. And it's just phenomenal how easy this makes the process, how easy it is to make better decisions, smarter, more sustainable, healthier, and more aesthetically pleasing decisions, right? All in one place, just that whole system. But I think it's important to note that even though the data is at your fingertips, that data is perhaps publicly accessible or a little less confidential, so to speak. And I bring that up because we got a question in the chat from one of our folks in the line about the kind of degree of pushback that perhaps we get from privacy advocates, legal, HR, and on collecting and using individual data. And I think that brings us back to the conversation around employee experience. And I'm sharing the results from the poll because it looks like most folks in the line don't use AI to influence their employee experience, and perhaps this is why. So I think, Elena, you're probably best suited to jump in here and share some of your thoughts on that question. And I'm also going to continue this show and tell trend and share your platform.
Sounds good. So before we go there, I just wanted to share a little bit of my own personal experience as someone who worked with some of the most talented architects for the past 10 years. I had a chance to work with Zaha Hadid, with Herzog de Meuron. And sometimes, and me and my team, we've done maybe 750 projects worldwide, headquarters, all kinds of large offices up to 5 million square feet. Sometimes you're in different time zones, and sometimes a tool like Federica just showed us could really help us understand architect's vision and help build the bridge between architect's vision and a furniture dealer or a furniture manufacturer or a furniture producer. Because sometimes, yes, you can kind of like use your best judgment as a furniture person to help kind of like offer whatever piece of furniture that will work for this space. But if you have this product that Federica just showed us, it's just going to save a lot of time to people who are working with your design, and then you'll get a better result. So again, what I love about AI is that now you can really build better offices using AI tools. Again, sometimes that helps you design a better office based on your knowledge, based on your experience, based on the data that you have about your specific customer and what they need out of space. So Can I just pause here for a second? I want to also, before we jump here, I want to answer the question that we got from Niels. So the question is, I love all the opportunities that come with the broader use of AI tools in making the office more efficient and productive. To what degree do you get pushback from privacy advocates, legal HR on collecting and using individual data? So first of all, we are not trying to build a big brother here, and I'm very, I do take a lot of measures on how not to create anything that will cause more harm than good, and I do take it very seriously. Ethical. There are so many ethical barriers that we create on purpose in order for us to make sure that we will not share information, even information about employees, to their employer that can be used to create more problems than good. So I do take it very seriously. And again, I can that probably deserves another 2-hour conversation. So the most important is that you as an employee can choose what to share or what not to share. It's totally up to you. It starts with basic stuff you can choose not to be even shown on the floor plan. Or not to share, what kind of coffee you prefer. Anyway, it's a very simple example, but it is you're in control. You can totally decide what you want to share or what you don't want to share. And then obviously this is company's data. This is not our data. This is not somebody else's data. It is your private environment. So AI learns based on your data, not on somebody else's data. So yes, we do take all kinds of measures to make sure that it will be safe and secure, and we're not gonna overstep anything that shouldn't be overstepped. And we work with HR and with admins and with their IT experts and cybersecurity experts to make sure that we will protect them from all sides. So it's a very important question, and this is probably this is the bottleneck when it comes to implementing a lot of projects. But at the same time, the best part about it is it's your data. As a company, you decide what you want to do with it, and these are your insights. Yeah, now we can move to the video. All right, so now let's look how do we collect these data points from the employee perspective. Amy, will you be able to show it? Yeah, so from the employee perspective, it looks like this. So basically you have an app, and it's also available on the web, of course. And you can just, again, it's kind of hard to see here, but you can ask the system, hey, I need to book a desk. And the system will remind you hey, do you need a parking? Or it can be, hey, I need to work with my work bestie Anna. Let me book a desk next to her. Or I need to meet with these people in Toronto office, and the system will remind you, not just book you the space that really meets your needs, but also will order lunch if it's, if the meeting is happening during lunch hours. So from the admin perspective, you can ask all kinds of questions about your space. What are the right sizing opportunities? How can I increase employee engagement? What do they need from me to deliver better employee experience? And at the end, you get up to 80% office space optimization, and you can increase productivity by 30%. So again, there are so many different use cases, and what we really like to do, we like to start with the most painful problem, whatever it is, and then we work on some other less important aspects of employee experience and employee engagement. So we cover the most important ones. Usually they're around space, how to book a desk, how to book a room, how to invite your guests, how to process all of your guests without office managers having to do all of this hard work, and they have already a lot on their shoulders. So we cover the basics first, and then from there we can take it to the next level, and we can elevate the experience to whatever level and whatever degree you would like it to be elevated to. All right, do we have any more questions here?
Amazing. No, and I think we are at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. But before we jump off, I think maybe we can just do a quick one last thought before we leave. If you each have one additional point that you want to make or leave our audience with in terms of what to keep in mind when implementing or transforming processes with AI in order to elevate employee experience and building performance. I know we leaned more heavily into employee experience and maybe alluded to building performance, so we may save that for another webinar as well. But let's do a quick round robin just to hear one last thought that you want folks not to lose sight of. Maybe we can start with Dan. Are you ready to start?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go quick. Yeah, there's so many things related to building performance, and we didn't get a chance to talk about one tool that we used recently, Autodesk Forma, on our office, which we just remodeled, and we have a hot desk system, and we have less desks than people from day one, and have the opportunity to actually grow as a company without having to expand space or add desks or reconfigure, which is really exciting. And some of that is based on some, fundamental principles of like Plato's a B Corp, and we're going after certifications like well building and focused on occupant health and comfort, in addition to having a beautiful looking building. And so, yeah, the sustainability and occupant health of the workplace experience is really important. I look forward to more features like what we saw here, and like dashboards and opportunities to track things like embodied carbon and material reuse and support of the circular economy. So I could go on and on, but that's my final thoughts.
Perfect. Aleda, you're still off mute, so I was wondering if you wanted to jump back in and say your last thought.
Yes, I believe that there are so many opportunities right now, and we even don't know the full extent of where this new wave of AI will take us. I think it's most important right now to cover the basics, cover the most use cases, to really try it for yourself, try to cover most painful problems that your organization or your customer's organization is facing right now, whether it's like too many desks, not enough people, too many people, not enough desks, or vice versa, or simply less than perfect employee experience, and kind of like take it from there. But I do think it's quite important to start maybe playing with it right now to see what else can the system do for you. And that's where I believe a lot of new opportunities that even us, we don't know yet what's going to happen in a year or two. That's where a lot of opportunities are still there. But whatever we have already, it's pretty fascinating. So I'm very excited for the future. I've been working in this industry for the past 18 years, and it never stops to amaze me what new things, what kind of new products come up. And again, I do believe sky's the limit. So excited to share some more use cases if anyone is curious.
Perfect. Federico?
I'll keep it brief because I know people have to jump. But I wanted to just say thank you to Amy for inviting us and having us. And yeah, that's my closing thought. Don't all of this stuff is changing super quickly, and I think we all need to just sort of take it in stride. But there's a lot of positive with it, as much as there isn't. So.
Love that. Short and sweet. We hit all the points that you wanted to hit, so why not just leave it there? And so with that, thank you everybody for joining us and listening to us share what we've learned, what we've seen, what's on our minds in terms of how AI is integrating itself into our world of workplace employee experience and building performance. I hope you've started to see that there is such a diversity of ways that it can be applied to optimize, adapt, improve not only your designs, but the way in which you interact with your workplace environment. So thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something, and we're excited to see you at our next webinar. Bye.
Thank you so much.